All right, good morning, everyone. Today is Friday, October 14th, 2022. My name is Shana Horton, and I serve as the TABC's rules attorney. We're here today for a stakeholder meeting regarding draft rule 3355, conditional approval. I do have some information I want to share with y'all before we get started. I have received some communications about concerns since this draft rule was made public regarding the functionality of the public inquiry and how that's going to work with AIMS. We've had some issues with updating when it updates and whether it's going to be timely. And as you know, in subsection A, which is already part of this rule, the issuance of the license or permit is going to key off of the date that the public database is updated to show the application is pending. So there were some concerns about that. I am very pleased to tell you that those were resolved as of yesterday. If you go on our website, you'll see the public inquiry link is there, and what's going to happen with AIMS. In VR, we had to, a human being had to actually flag something to make that populate to the pending list. In AIMS, if any application is completed in AIMS, it's going to automatically run. It's going to talk to AIMS overnight in a batch. So the lag time between receiving an application, a completed application in AIMS, and it being listed on public inquiry should be no more than overnight. So check that out on our website and see how well that works now. So pleased to say we're able to address that concern, I believe. However, I see that Mr. Schwartz is on our call. Marcus, does that address your concern?
Yes, Shannon. Hi, Marcus Schwartz, Bracken Schwartz PLC. It certainly will. I'm looking at public inquiry now. I don't see pending as an option like it was in the past, but maybe they put pending under one of the other categories. I don't know. See if, I can play around with it and let you know.
Let me see if Julie Ross is on the call. Julie, do you have any insight?
Good morning, Julie Ross, Deputy Director of Resource and Planning and Licensing. Yes, Marcus, it's a separate link now. It's a link, I believe it says applications pending. So it's not in the same section. It's underneath there. When you go to those links, it's underneath the license selections. So it's set on the license.
So
I see it now. Thank you. I appreciate that. I was doing it the old way.
Yes, you'll just play around, and then if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. I'll be glad to help you.
Thanks, Julie. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
That was the really the only issue that had been brought up to me before this meeting, but of course we're here to talk about any other questions or concerns you have, especially with respect to subsection C, which is primarily the new portion. Essentially, the reason that we added this is that there's a small set of applications that have come through where the checks are returned for insufficient funds. And at that point, if we continually ask for payment, we don't hear back. We needed to have kind of a procedure that's very clear and transparent as to how we're going to handle that situation. And also wanted to make clear in the rule that it's not a revocation of a permit or license that has been issued. In fact, if your payment is incomplete, you didn't have a complete application in the first place. So it doesn't need to go through our commissioners or anything like that as a revocation of a license or a permit. It's essentially issued, not really issued at all. It's conditional until you've got all of your payment of fees in, and that has cleared. So we added that so our licensing department can have a good, transparent process for managing those small subset of applicants and applications. With that said, I will open up the floor to your questions and comments. If you would like to speak, just unmute yourself, state your name and who you're representing, and ask away.
Shana, this is Lance Lively with the Texas Package Stores Association. Good morning. Thanks for having the call today. Real quick, I think our only main concern is whether a single notice in 10 days is enough to trigger, and not to call it this, but sort of the death penalty, as it were. I think we would feel more comfortable with a 30-day window and a second notice before triggering that. Give it a little more time. That's really the only thing that jumped off at us with regard to this. So maybe a bit more time before we, go down that road, but that.
I think we lost you there, but yes, I understand your concern. The reason that we chose 10 days is because that's already in our rules as far as if we ask you for additional information to complete your application and we don't hear back from you, that's a 10-day window. I think in practice, you're obviously given multiple chances in reality, but I will take down your concern and we'll consider whether we need to add in a little bit more time there.
Good morning. This is Amy Harrison, representing Amy Harrison Consulting. Hope everyone is well. Thank you for the time. I am very practical, and so I'm not as fast as Marcus, as we all know. And I've gone in and run on public inquiry the pending applications. I get a list that gives me an application ID and the license type. I show initiated versus reviewed versus received. I have no idea who these people are, including if any of them are my own clients. So can somebody explain to me this and how it relates to the rule? Please.
I'm going to have to defer to Julie on this question as well.
Good morning, Amy. I'll have to look at it again because I'm not sure exactly what you're seeing, because it should be picking up anything that's received or in review, not initiated. So if you want,
I don't see a name. I don't see who the applicant is or the address. Am I supposed to see that?
yes, it should be on there if it's in the system, which it should be. So if you want, you can send that one to me and I can surely take a look at it for you and then get back with you on it if you'd like.
And hey, all, Marcus Shorts and Amy, for what it's worth, I did my first one and it seems to pull up everything. And you'll even note that they split it up between, MB, FB, LH. They'll have their own separate entries.
Yes, because it should also look separately at any subordinate.
So in practicality, how does this work? I appear on the web page.
Look at it.
And what happens as associated with this rule? What I've applied today and I've hit the website. Now what happens?
I'm not sure that I understand exactly what you're asking. Sorry.
So what should happen, Amy, is that if you have completed the application process, you get to the end of it and it says application, what does it say when you get to the end? Received. Then it will run, there will be a batch that runs overnight, and the next day you should be able to come to the database and see that that application will be listed as received. Does that sound right, Julie?
Yes, ma'am.
So 15 days after that, I'm a permit?
Right.
So is day one the day that I'm posted on the website?
Correct.
So day one that I'm on the website, I can start counting. And 15 days from that date, I become a conditionally approved permit. And what is the system going to say on day 15?
I don't know that there will be a change.
Yeah,
Is
there's
there-
not,
It should still say pending until that, payment goes through and everything. I mean, the 15-day window really gives people additional time to be able to protest and all of that. And then this conditional approval that we put in subsection C, that allows us to get people granted their permit while payment clears. And then it also allows us to work with a permit or an applicant who did have insufficient funds and give them some extra time to make the payment so then they can still have their application.
Right, essentially what the 15 days is about is we have to give people sufficient time after the application is posted. We have to give the public that time to protest if they want to. But in recognition of the fact that sometimes people need their licenses or permits faster than that, we need to get operating, and we want to obviously support that. That's why we're saying, go ahead and start operating. If you get a protest later, or if your check doesn't clear, then we have this process for working with that situation, even though you've already maybe started operating. And we just want to make clear how we're going to go about managing that situation when it happens. And the whole purpose of that is just so that people can get started when they need to get started and not have to wait for us.
I guess I apologize. Y'all know I'm a visual. In fact, I've driven many of you crazy with that. So I make application day 1, I'm in the system. Day 15, you're going to show me as approved, or does on day 15 I show conditionally approved? What happens on day 15 on public inquiry?
it should still show as a pending application until we go in and approve that application.
But on day 15, I'm able to begin operations, even though the system says pending.
Yes, so if no valid protests are filed at the end of that period, then the license or permit becomes approved by operation of law. So yes, that is correct. More hands. Tana Travis.
Thank you, Shanna. So this is quite a departure from what we've done in the past. And I kind of agree with Amy. I think it can be confusing. In the past, when an application was submitted, there were a few instances where the executive director was able to grant a permit conditionally. But the applicant or the permit holder received a letter that said your permit has been conditionally approved, and then the public website updated to show it was issued after that 15 days. All the other applications were processed as normal. And then once the application was reviewed by the application manager, the permit was issued, which could be much later. So I'm just wanting to make sure we're clear.
That's my understanding. The conditional approval is based on, there's just a small segment of those. That's not every application.
So
I didn't think.
That's not correct. So every application is conditionally approved until the money comes through. And with most folks, that's not going to be an issue at all. This is a very small subset of people who are sending in a check that bounces. And so I don't think this is going to really impact many of you at all. The point is just to give you a very clear way that we're going to handle that if your check does bounce. But and Julie might be able to elucidate more on how the differences between the old system and the new. We're trying to eliminate the need for a human being to go in and check a toggle box or click on something. We're trying to automate it more. That's the whole point of AIMS, so that there aren't delays based upon those of us, who are human, not having enough time to get to something, or having trying to eliminate those backups in applications that we have experienced sometimes in the past.
And I think, Shayna, maybe where the confusion is what we're talking about, what's been added to this rule is strictly for those insufficient, the ones that come back insufficient versus every original that's filed or renewal that's filed. So this is specifically for those, just saying that if we receive that money back, that conditional, if we approve your application, it's conditionally approved. If we get that check returned, that conditional approval goes away. So I think that's kind of maybe where the confusion is. Every original application that's submitted versus what we're talking about for insufficient funds only. Does that
Yes, I think that's really good clarification. I mean, the only change in this rule right now, the only thing it impacts are insufficient fund applications. Otherwise, the same process that we've been using even for the past couple of weeks within the AIM system, that still stays the same.
Right.
So, Matthew,
Yes.
Do you want to scoot over?
this is Tana.
Good morning.
Good morning. So, previously the number of people that got a conditional approval and got that letter from the executive director were very few. So basically all this rule is doing is saying, if you submit your payment via AIMS and the check comes back bad, you're going to have to take care of it. It's not going to change the process for any other applicant. We're still going to wait for y'all to approve it and send us that congratulations email, correct?
Exactly.
Yes.
Thank
correct.
you. Thank you.
Yeah, again, it's only going to impact those return check folks, and it's actually not going to be something that shows up in AIMS or anything like that. It's just the reason for putting this in here is that we want to make clear that even if you've gotten your message from AIMS that your license or permit application has been approved, that if later your check bounces, that we're not revoking something from you that you've gotten. What's actually happened is, you were conditionally approved, assuming that last piece of the application was going to come in. And when it doesn't, we're going to say that was conditional, and the condition that you didn't meet was having that check clear. And so we're going to work with you to get that done. So it's really not much of a practical change for anyone, just trying to help out our licensing staff with a way for them to move forward with this bunch of applicants, a small set of applicants that have not yet corrected that insufficient funds error.
And it does give some additional time to people that had an initial insufficient funds to cure that without having to get a denial and then go back through the whole process of applying again.
Right.
Because I think we have found that, a lot of times there are a lot of people that didn't realize maybe they needed to move some money over into a new account quickly. They get that notice from TABC and then cure that and make the payment. And so this allows them to still be able to operate during that time period while they're working with the agency.
I see, Mr. Schwartz, your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you. I just want to say this generally. That I think this is extremely narrow subset. I mean, the reality of the situation is that, and I'd love to get to the point where bounce checks are holding up applications, but I don't think we're there yet. So in reality, TBC in most cases is going to be able to tell the applicant even before they issue the permit, because they're still working it, that, hey, we need the funds before we're going to issue the permit. As I understand it, this is a really narrow subset that can most of the time involves international transfers, and it sometimes messes with the comptroller's internal system because, of course, it's the comptroller clearing this money. It's not the agency. So a lot of this is on the comptroller and their timing, and the agency is just being reactionary. So I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, that's correct. And we do have limited control over, whether it clears or not, and when it clears, because it isn't us that's doing that. It is the comptroller's office. So we're just trying to create some flexibility for our staff to work with. Julie, can you describe the subset of applications Was that accurate, what Marcus just said about the international and account?
Yes, I think it's that. And I think, at the beginning of Ames, things were getting issued probably quicker, maybe, for some of these renewals. And so we were just having that issue as very small subset, just a very few. But it was enough, there were a few where we just couldn't get payment. So we're just trying to come up with a clear, consistent way, where it's not difficult for the industry or for us, when it comes to trying to resolve the issue. But it's a very small, subset of these that happen. And I think it's probably, even slowed down. And generally, I would say, obviously most of the time when we reach out, people take care of that issue.
Right. And so I think we're all kind of getting on the same page now that this is a really small group. It's probably not any of your clients. And so if we're trying to keep it that narrow. So I would, appreciate if you're reading this and you think that it's going to loop in someone else or have other unintended consequences, please do let me know, because that is not our intent. Our intent is just to have this very narrow procedural procedure for this small group of folks that have these insufficient funds, and then we can't get them to cure it. Other questions and comments? Not seeing any hands raised right now.
Apparently, I don't know how to raise my hand and I end up cutting myself off. So my apologies. I'll just barge in again. So 15 days, and we're talking about this belongs to a very small subset. How many renewals or originals are actually being issued 15 days from receipt? I mean, is this really happening? Because God, I wish it were happening to me. Is anybody getting a permit in less than 15 days?
That's something, that's not really what this rule change is about, but maybe Julie can talk to you about that offline or.
Yeah, I don't have any of that information handy right now, but I can definitely see what I can find out for you.
This particular change is just with regard to insufficient funds. The 15 days has already exists in the rule.
Maybe if you change the title to the rule and make it clearer that it's conditional approval is related to payment or related to fees. It's a very confusing rule. I think, Marcus and I have been around the block a time or two, and we were confused by reading it and trying to associate it with today's practical world of what we're doing in Ames in the days. So maybe a better title to the rule, or maybe just something that makes it very clear that the whole rule only has to do with payment, perhaps, in the conditional approval.
Whole rule. It's only subsection C, which is the change. The other parts of the rule apply to everyone. And in fact, this applies to everyone. It's just, it only has any impact if you have an insufficient funds return. But the rest of the rule is not just for those who have insufficient funds.
Right. Subsections A and B are not about necessarily payment.
No. I mean, we are not going to issue a license or a permit until we've given the public 15 days to see that application and file a protest if they wish to for anyone. Unless there's an exception approved, of course.
What area of the code, what statute does this rule apply to, please?
We need to find the exact one, but it's I would say it's the one in chapter 5 that gives the agency that broad rulemaking authority. There's not a specific provision within the code that directs the agency to promulgate a rule specifically about these types of fee payments or insufficient
Well,
funds.
and during last legislative session, yeah, that the insufficient funds, that's correct. This is just giving us a procedure to use, and we're being transparent about it by putting it in the rule. As far as the rest of the rule goes, that was adopted in response to the sunset bill, which required us to adopt rules regarding the protest and hearing process. I don't have that citation off the top of my head, but I can find it for you. Edgar.
Thank you, Shana. Maybe what I think Amy's asking for is what authority does the commission have to do conditional approvals as opposed to regular approvals? Do you have some statutes or an enabling statute that gives the commission authority that you could cite to?
I mean, essentially what if you don't want conditional approval, what that's going to mean is that you don't have approval and you can't start operating. So the reason that we have conditional approval is to facilitate people being able to get operating more quickly. I'll have to, I'll take a look and provide you with a citation. I will do that. I'll send it to you. If anyone else wants that citation, please let me know in the comments for conditional approval. I'm not gonna be able to do that research on the spot right here.
And Sheena, just one follow-up. It's not that we're against putting applicants into business faster. This is more of a concern. Once you make a licensing determination, is what authority do you have to go and yank that licensing determination? And so that's what we wanted clarification on.
I can answer that question, and that is that your application has to be complete. And if you don't have the payment, it essentially was an incomplete application. We just didn't know that at the time. And rather than making people wait, this is a way to kind of let it go forward. But it's not that we're revoking something. It's that you never had it in the first place. And that's why we're putting this into rule. So that makes that clear. And we have that authority because if your application is incomplete and we find that out at a later date, or if there's something that was incorrect or something that was misrepresented, that application was incomplete and you never were issued a license or permit, essentially, legally speaking. Of course you were, but legally speaking, that was issued in error because it was an incomplete application. So it's not revoking something that you really had. And I think that's, I mean, it's a legal concept. So I think it's kind of hard to wrap your head around because it's doing something sort of retroactively, but it's the fact of the matter is the only way to not do it that way would be to force people to wait longer before they can start their business, so that we can make sure that every check has come through and that 15 days are over and there's no, all that stuff. So I think this is just a concession, again, and it is to make sure that people can get started, and we assume that things are going to shake out in the next, couple of weeks after that application goes through. Ms. Travis?
Thank you, Shanna. So based on what you just said, anybody after that, could start operating even if the agency hasn't finally approved the permit at our own risk.
What do you mean by finally approved?
Finished processing the application. So if an applicant, based on the first section, is conditionally approved, then they could start operating at their own risk
Yes.
before the agency has finally or finished reviewing or even started reviewing their application, because it's taken my applications 25 to 30 days to even be assigned for review. So we're doing that at our own risk.
I don't know.
May I jump in here?
Sure.
Marcus Schwartz. So I think there's some misunderstanding here. B says the commission may grant conditional approval. And so that's wholly on the commission. And unless the condition gives a conditional approval, and conditional approval means, hey, here's your permit number, you can go sell, then you can't start doing anything after 15 days. In other words, a permit has to issue either normal approval or this special limited circumstance conditional approval.
I agree with you,
So A
Marcus.
doesn't kick in unless B kicks in, and B is only done on special exception by the commission. So if we have applicants in there that have been for 15 days and they start selling, that's a no-no. That's how I read this.
I agree. And even before I retired, I know of one instance, and the executive director, we actually issued a letter that says your permit has been conditionally approved.
Right, so conditional, what subsection B says, or what subsection A says is we shall not issue a license or permit until 15 days have elapsed, not that once 15 days have elapsed, your license or permit is issued. And those are two different things.
Right, there's still going to be a notification that you either got approved or you have a conditional approval. It's not just the applicant hits submit, waits a 15-day window, and then decides they get to just go operate. You still have to wait for that communication from the agency.
And I think I misspoke earlier in that, so.
I think it was about saying that it's going to be approved by operation of law, but that's because that language is actually in subsection B, but that only comes up in the scenario that the executive director granted a specific type of conditional approval under that subsection.
Right, with a compelling reason to issue before the 15 days for protest have elapsed.
Right. And then at that point in time, if there are no protests, then that conditional approval by operation of law will become a automatic full approval. But again, there was still a notification that was given to the applicant, so they were aware that they had received that conditional approval.
Right. Additional comments or questions? You don't have to raise your hand. You can just unmute and start talking. That's no problem.
Thank you for not making me raise my hand, even though I was told it was the polite thing to do. I was told recently by the comptroller's office that there is a difference in the clearance times between if you pay by ACH versus if you pay with credit card, because credit card is secured and an ACH is not secured. Does anybody know if that's accurate, and if that's the situation that you all are seeing if people pay ACH versus credit card?
I can say that makes sense, but I don't think Shana and I would know that because we're not the ones actually doing the processing.
But there may be someone on the call that
Right.
has some insight.
And I'm not sure if that would need to be someone from BSD as well.
Probably. I'm not seeing,
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. This is Julie. I think that would need to come from BSD.
Business Services Division, for those of you who are not familiar. And so if you want to reach out to them, Amy, I'm sure they could help you with that question. I'm sorry, I don't have that information right now.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so just to recap, make sure that we're clear, because I feel like we had a lot of questions coming at it from different angles. So subsection A, which already exists, says we're not going to issue anything for 15 days because we need to give the public time to protest. Subsection B says, except if the executive director, you petition the executive director and you say, look, I know we're supposed to wait 15 days, but it's really important that I get started now. The executive director can grant conditional approval during that 15-day window for you to begin operating. If he will have seen that, the executive director will have looked at the application. Well, that's a conditional approval from the executive director. And so once that time expires, that 15 days expires, it makes sense that that would just be automatically approved by operation of law. It's already been reviewed. Subsection C, which is the new section, it applies to everyone, but it only kicks in and it only has any impact on you if you're one of these folks that has a return check for insufficient funds. And essentially what it says is, if you're already operating and making investments and paying your rent and all that kind of stuff before, and your check is returned for insufficient funds, you don't have a license or permit until you cure that, and we're giving you an opportunity to cure that. And if you don't, then that will be revoked. And then of course we have how we're going to handle in subsection D, how we're going to handle refunds. So that's always a question. It is not the case that on the 16th day, every applicant is automatically approved. Again, that top section just says that we won't approve something before 15 days. And that's just a due process consideration for members of the public. Other questions or comments from folks inside the agency? Y'all are welcome to send me a message. Okay. Again, if you feel like something that we're doing in this subsection C, which is the change, is would impact more people than we intend. We only intend for this to have any impact on those who have their checks returned for insufficient funds and then do not cure that defect. If it affects anyone else, in your opinion, I would like to know that, because that's not our intent. And also, if you have any other questions about how this is going to work in Ames, y'all can shoot those to me, and I can forward them to someone who can answer your question. As I've said before, I'm blissfully unaware of Ames problems until they're brought to my attention, but I can definitely be that point of contact for you, and then send that off to the person that needs to respond to that question. So, and I know that functionality, like we said, is being tweaked all the time. We got this this new pending list just yesterday, so we're continually working to try to make the process as smooth as possible and information as readily available as possible. So we're interested in how that's working for you. If you have trouble with that pending list, we want to help you figure it out. And if we need to make changes, we need to know that too. So you can always send it to shana.horton@tabc.texas.gov, or you can send it to rules@tabc.texas.gov. And this, we intend to present for formal rule proposal at the next commission meeting, pending executive director approval. Okay. And I apologize for the confusion. I know it's hard to explain things in response to questions, I think, because like I said, you're coming at it from so many different angles. But if you think of anything else, or if you're still confused by this discussion, please do reach out. I'm always here, always happy to help. We want to get everything worked out before we get in front of the commission at our open meeting. With that said, are there any other comments or questions that anyone would like to discuss today? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody. Thank you all for your time and attention and good questions. And I will give you back some of your time, and I hope you all have a lovely weekend.